Evangeline Koo. And like each one of you here, she loved to write. For a decade, she wrote poems, stories.
When Camilla traveled to her daughter Laura's home for a quiet family event, she had no idea that the biggest shock of her marriage was about to unfold back at Clarence's house. While she was away, King Charles wandered into her study and discovered a small, old diary tucked beneath a pile of heavy books. Curious, he opened it and realized it was Camilla'S private diary from years earlier. The pages spoke of a secret love, hidden letters, and a man named George Manuel someone Charles had never heard of. His heart ached as he read the truths she had never shared. Who was George Manuel, and why had Camilla kept him hidden? Earlier that day, Camilla had packed her weekend bag with a smile, looking forward to visiting Laura in the countryside. It was Laura and Harry's wedding anniversary, and the family had planned a quiet celebration at their beautiful home in Wiltshire. Charles would have loved to join them, but his schedule was filled with official duties he could not postpone. That morning, he kissed her goodbye and handed her a box of carefully chosen anniversary gifts for the couple. "Give them my love," he said warmly. "I wish I could be there." Camilla promised she would and felt light and free as her car pulled away from Clarence's house. 2 whole days with her family, away from the formalities of royal life, felt like a precious gift. Back at Clarence's house, Charles tried to settle into a quiet weekend of paperwork, phone calls, and a simple dinner alone. But the house felt unusually still without Camilla. By evening, restlessness crept over him, and he wandered through the rooms searching for something to read, something to distract his mind. His feet carried him down the hallway toward Camilla'S private study, a small room she reserved for herself. He rarely entered it. It was her space, filled with books, letters, and memories. But tonight he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of lavender, and shelves lined the walls with novels and old volumes. Charles scanned them absently, running his fingers along the spines, until his eyes fell on a stack of books on the corner desk, which looked slightly out of place. The stack of books on Camilla'S desk looked disturbed, as if someone had recently searched through them. Beneath the heavy novels, something caught Charles's eye. A small, leather-bound book, dark brown and worn with age, wedged awkwardly between the larger volumes, almost hidden. He frowned, having never seen it before, and carefully pulled it free, turning it over in his hands. It was a diary, old, personal, the leather softened from years of handling, the edges frayed. His heart began to beat faster. Did it belong to Camilla? If so, why had she never mentioned it? Standing in the dim light of the study, Charles held the diary, torn between respecting her privacy and giving in to curiosity about the secrets it might contain. His thumb traced the worn spine, hesitant. Finally, he sat in the chair by the desk and opened it. The first page made his breath catch. Written in elegant, youthful handwriting were the words Camilla Rosemary Shand. His heart jumped. The date at the top read 1973 before everything, before their affair had even begun. For a moment, he felt a flutter of excitement, hoping the diary would reveal the young Camilla he had fallen in love with. Perhaps confessions of affection or secret notes about him. But as he turned the pages, his excitement waned. The entries spoke not of him, but of someone else, someone mysterious who clearly meant a great deal to her. One line read, "He understands me in ways no one else ever could." Another, "I think about him constantly. I should not, but I cannot help it. The only man I have ever truly loved." Charles's chest tightened. Who was this man? Page after page revealed secret meetings, exchanged letters, longing, heartbreak, and impossible dreams. Then, finally, a name, George Manuel. Charles stared at it in disbelief, repeating it silently. Not a cousin, not a relative, but a stranger, someone from a life he had never known. His hands trembled as he continued reading, piecing together the story of a passionate secret love that perhaps had been deeper than anything he had imagined. Suddenly, several folded letters slipped out, yellowed with age and tied with a faded ribbon. Charles picked them up, his fingers fumbling with the ribbon, and unfolded the first. The handwriting was bold and confident, nothing like his own careful script. The words were tender, passionate, and full of longing. George Manuel had loved Camilla with a fire that blazed through every sentence, writing of stolen moments, impossible dreams, and a love that defied the world's rules. Charles felt something twist inside him: jealousy, betrayal, confusion, all at once. The woman he had married, the woman he had loved for decades, had once loved another with an intensity that shook him to his core. And she had never told him. He sat there in the quiet study, the letters spread across the desk, the diary open beside them, his mind screaming with questions. Who was George Manuel? Why had Camilla kept these secrets? And most painfully, did she still think of him? Charles unfolded the first letter carefully and began to read. The handwriting was elegant but unfamiliar, belonging to a young man who wrote with passion, urgency, and a love so deep it hurt. George Manuel poured his heart onto the page, telling Camilla how empty and meaningless each day felt without her. He described the cold rejection of her family, their disapproving glances and doors closed to him, frustrated that social class and lack of title kept them apart. He begged her to wait, to hold on, to believe that their love could somehow survive despite the obstacles. Every word carried raw emotion, and Charles felt his chest tighten. This was not a casual fling, it was profound, consuming, and real. He moved to the next letter, then the next, each revealing glimpses of their secret world. Midnight meetings in hidden gardens, quiet walks along empty roads, stolen moments and whispered promises, dreams of a future that seemed impossible yet vividly alive when they were together. A sharp pang of jealousy struck Charles. These moments should have been his. These words should have been for him, but they belonged to someone else. Someone Camilla had loved long before he entered her life. One letter from 1973 hit him like a physical blow. George wrote of watching Camilla marry Andrew Parker, saying he felt crushed, destroyed, as if his heart had been ripped from his chest. Though he understood why she had to go through with it, the pain remained unbearable. He vowed he would always love her, even if she could never be his. Charles stared at the letter, shaking, his mind reeling. He had believed Camilla married Andrew out of practicality or expectation, but now he understood the truth. She had not chosen Andrew out of love, she had been forced to give up George. The realization shattered something inside him. All these years, he had thought he knew her, that their love was the defining story of her life, only to discover there had been someone before him who had claimed her heart fully. Alone in the quiet study, surrounded by letters and memories that were not his, Charles felt like a stranger in his own marriage. What else had she kept hidden? He could not sleep that night, poring over every diary entry and letter, piecing together a story he had never known. As he read, he imagined young Camilla in her early 20s, meeting George Manuel at a casual gathering with friends, and felt the weight of a love lost long before he had ever arrived in her life. George Manuel was not a lord or a duke. He had no title, no grand estate, no family name to open doors. Yet he was kind, warm, and attentive in a way no one else had ever been with Camilla. Their love grew quietly and carefully, away from society's watchful eyes. They met in secret, walked together on empty roads, talked for hours about everything and nothing, and laughed until their sides hurt. For Camilla, it felt like freedom, like home. But her parents saw things differently. When they discovered George, they were horrified. Without status, wealth, or aristocratic lineage, he was deemed unworthy. In their world, love was never enough. What mattered was position, reputation, and the right marriage. They forbade her from seeing him. Yet young love does not easily die. Camilla and George continued their relationship in shadows, exchanging letters and meeting whenever they could. She dreamed of a life with him, of running away, choosing love over duty, imagining a simple life far from her family's expectations. But her dreams were fragile. Her family increased the pressure, reminding her of her responsibilities, of potential scandal, of the disgrace she would bring upon them. Months passed, and the weight became unbearable. Ultimately, her family arranged for her to marry Andrew Parker, a man possessing the status, title, and connections George could not offer. Exhausted and heartbroken, Camilla acquiesced. On the night before her wedding, she recorded in her diary her sorrow, acknowledging that she was choosing duty, not happiness, giving up the only man she had ever truly loved. She married Andrew, smiled for the cameras, and played the role expected of her, but inside her heart remained broken. George watched from a distance, helpless, and Camilla carried the pain with her, buried where no one could see it. Charles closed the diary and leaned back, overwhelmed by what he had learned. This was more than a secret from Camilla's past, it was a wound that had never fully healed, a love stolen from her by circumstance. And now he understood that when she eventually came to him, she was not choosing him out of pure love. She was choosing him because George was gone, that door closed forever, and she had learned to live without the man she truly wanted. As Charles turned further into the diary, the timeline moved into the mid-1970s, when he and Camilla had first met and begun their affair. He remembered the stolen moments, the excitement, the feeling of something special between them. He had believed he was her great love, the one who truly mattered. Yet the diary revealed otherwise. Even after marrying Andrew and beginning her relationship with Charles, Camilla continued to write about George, reflecting on him, wondering where he was, and admitting that part of her heart always belonged to the man she had been forced to give up. In an entry from 1976, she wrote of Charles, describing him as a comfort who alleviated the loneliness of her marriage to Andrew. She acknowledged his kindness and attentiveness, his ability to listen in ways Andrew never did. Yet, she confessed something that shattered Charles. While he filled a void in her life, he was not the love she had ever truly known. Charles read on, his heart heavy as the diary revealed the full complexity of Camilla'S life. She had loved George Manuel deeply, and though Andrew was her official husband, and he provided her with comfort, Charles realized George had always been the man she truly wanted. He was not George, he could never be George. Staring at her words, he felt the devastating truth settle around him. He had been living in a story he did not fully understand. He had believed he was the hero of Camilla'S life, the great love she had chosen. Yet in reality, he had been just another chapter in a longer, more complicated book. Devastated and betrayed, he thought of all he had sacrificed for their relationship, the waiting, the fighting, the scandal he had endured, the life he had built with her, and now he understood that, all the while, her heart had belonged elsewhere. The study felt colder, darker, as he closed the diary and glanced at the scattered letters tied with a faded ribbon, reminders of memories that were not his. Hours passed as he remained frozen, unable to leave, staring at the final pages for some sense of closure. The entries from 2010, decades later, revealed something even more staggering. George had died that year, and Camilla had continued to grieve him privately. She described the moment she received the news, the way it felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet, how she could not breathe or think. Even more shocking, Charles learned that she and George had maintained a secret, intermittent correspondence throughout all these years, letters, phone calls, and brief meetings no one knew about even after she married him. She had carried George with her in her heart, calling him her first and truest love, the one with whom she had felt understood and free. Charles felt a rush of anger, hurt, and humiliation. It was not that she had loved someone before him, that he could have understood. It was that she had preserved that bond throughout their marriage, while he believed he was the only one who mattered. Every shared moment, every gesture, now felt shaded by the secret she had kept. Stiff from sitting so long, he rose and looked around the study, the books, the desk, the letters, Camilla'S private sanctuary that had held her hidden life from him. A decision formed in his mind. When Camilla returned from Laura's house, he would confront her. He would show her the diary and demand the truth. He deserved to know who he had truly married, who she had been all these years, and what place, if any, he had ever held in her heart. The question that burned in Charles's mind was relentless. Did she ever truly love him, or had he always been second to a ghost? He could not sleep that night, lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling as his mind raced with questions that had no answers. When morning came, he dragged himself from bed, hollow and exhausted, yet unable to rest or sit still. He returned to the study, reading the diary and letters again. Each word cut deeper, revealing new details that worsened his anguish. Small phrases, fleeting memories, fragments of a story he had never been part of collided in his mind. His emotions crashed over him like waves against rocks. First a deep, aching pain that made it hard to breathe, then anger, hot and fierce, making his hands shake and jaw clench. Disbelief followed, an insistent voice telling him it could not be true, yet the evidence was undeniable, written in Camilla'S own hand. Sadness settled over him like a heavy blanket. Threaded through it all was the bitter sting of betrayal. He had trusted her completely, believed in their love, fought the world to be with her, endured scandal and criticism, given up so much, and all the while, she had carried another man in her heart. The questions tormented him. Had she ever truly loved him? Was he merely a substitute for the man she had truly wanted? A convenient presence to fill the void George had left? He remembered their early days, the laughter, the quiet conversations, the way she had made him feel understood, accepted, like the only person in the world, but those memories now felt tainted, shadowed by the thought that she may have been thinking of George all along, measuring him against a love he could never be. He called her repeatedly, but she did not answer, likely caught up with Laura and the grandchildren, enjoying the anniversary celebration while he sat alone, drowning in heartbreak. He left no messages. What could he say without breaking entirely? The day dragged on. Charles cancelled all his appointments, told his staff he was unwell, and retreated to the study, sitting for hours among the diary and letters, examining each one as if some hidden truth might reveal itself, but there was none. Everything was clear. Camilla had loved another man more than she had ever loved him. As evening fell, he placed the diary and letters neatly on her desk, ensuring she would see them immediately upon her return, signaling that the secret was out and there was no more hiding. Then he sat by the window in darkness, waiting. The house was silent, staff moving cautiously, sensing something amiss. Charles barely noticed them, lost in thoughts of George Manuel, of a love story that had nothing to do with him, and of the woman he had thought he knew, but apparently did not. Night fell. He did not turn on the lights. He simply sat, rehearsing over and over what he would say. Should he remain calm, let his anger show, demand answers, or merely ask her to tell the truth? Yet no matter how he practiced, the words felt inadequate, incapable of expressing the depth of what he had discovered. Hours passed as Charles waited, checking his phone repeatedly, receiving no calls or messages. He wondered if Camilla somehow sensed that he had discovered her secret, though he knew that was impossible. Finally, past midnight, the sound of a car pulling up outside made his heart pound. He stood stiffly, listening as the front door opened, hearing Camilla's soft voice, likely thanking the driver, and then footsteps drawing closer. When she entered the study, still glowing from her weekend with family, her smile faltered as she saw his face, red-rimmed eyes, pale complexion, the visage of someone who had been crying for hours. Before she could speak, Charles pushed the diary across the desk toward her. Recognition struck her like a physical blow. Shock, fear, guilt, and overwhelming sadness washed over her. She sank into the chair across from him, trembling, tears streaming down her face, and for a long moment could only cry. When she finally spoke, she confessed everything. George Manuel had been her first love, the man she had wanted to marry when she was young. Her family had forbidden their relationship, forcing her to marry Andrew instead. And though she had loved Charles, it had been different, complicated, and always shadowed by George's memory. Then she admitted the secret that cut Charles the deepest. She had continued corresponding with George even after marrying Charles, exchanging occasional letters and private calls, never physical, but emotionally keeping him alive in her heart. She tried to explain that it was not betrayal, but a way of holding on to a part of herself from before her life had changed. Yet Charles could feel no comfort. His voice rose, raw with pain, as he accused her of hiding an entire emotional life, letting him believe he was the center of her world while she had shared her heart with a ghost. Camilla sobbed, apologizing, insisting she had never meant to hurt him, and that George had died years ago, leaving only memories. But for Charles, the revelation made the betrayal sharper. He realized he had spent their entire marriage competing with a dead man, a man who would remain forever perfect in her memory, frozen in time as the love she had been forced to give up. Unable to sit, he stood and paced the room, hands running through his hair, feeling as though his entire life, his love, and everything he had fought for had been built on a foundation that was never truly his. Camilla reached out to Charles, pleading with him to understand. She insisted that she loved him, that their marriage was real, that George was a figure of the past while Charles was her present and future. But Charles shook his head, his voice steady yet cold. Love built on secrets was not love, he said. He deserved honesty, deserved to know the truth about the woman he had married, and instead he had spent decades loving someone who had never fully belonged to him. Camilla collapsed into sobs, unable to defend herself, unable to make him understand. Charles left the study, leaving her alone with the diary, the letters, and the wreckage of the secret that had finally come to light. The house fell silent, though within both of them everything was screaming. Charles spent the night in his private chambers, sleepless, unable to eat, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. By morning, he had made a decision. This could not remain between just him and Camilla. The matter was too complex, too painful to handle alone. He needed counsel, witnesses, perspective. He summoned a private family meeting. Within hours, a small group assembled in one of the private sitting rooms at Clarence's house. Prince William arrived first, his face etched with concern and confusion, followed by the Queen's private secretary, discreet and professional as always, and finally Camilla's sister, Annabelle, looking worried and protective. Camilla was already there, fragile and broken, her eyes red from crying. Charles stood by the window, back to the room, before turning to address them. Calm at first, his voice grew firm and deliberate as he recounted what he had discovered. The diary, the letters, and the truth that Camilla had loved another man long before him. But worse, she had carried that emotional bond throughout their marriage, writing to George occasionally, speaking to him in private, keeping him alive in her heart, while Charles had been none the wiser. Charles's words were measured yet cutting. He spoke of betrayal, not of physical infidelity, but of the silence that had defined their relationship. He had given everything, endured scandal, fought for her, married her despite opposition, only to realize he had been sharing her heart with a ghost. Camilla, tears streaming, tried to defend herself. She reminded them that George had died years ago and that her communications had been innocent, nostalgic remnants of a past love. Annabelle spoke in her defense, explaining the depth of the loss Camilla had endured in youth, the sacrifice she had been forced to make, and the pain she had carried ever since. William listened carefully, troubled, reminded that Camilla had chosen Charles, built a life with him, and that had to count for something. Yet Charles shook his head. This was not about choice, it was about honesty, about trust, about the years spent believing he was the most important person in her life while learning he had shared that space all along. The meeting grew more emotional. Voices rose, tears were shed, and the private secretary observed quietly, noting the unprecedented domestic crisis. Finally, Charles announced that he needed distance, time to process and decide if he could continue. Camilla was to temporarily move to Raymill House, her private countryside residence. She protested, begging to stay, to work through the pain together, but Charles was resolute. This was not punishment, it was necessity. She nodded slowly, unsteady, accepting the decision, understanding that there was nothing more to say. The next morning, Camilla left Clarence's house quietly, packing lightly and departing without ceremony. A car waited to take her to Raymill House, her longtime refuge in the countryside. Charles watched from the window, motionless, neither waving nor calling out. When the car disappeared down the road, the palace felt emptier than it ever had. Charles returned to the study. The diary lay on the desk where he had left it, heavier now with all the pain it had caused. He opened it once more, not to seek betrayal, not to search for new secrets, but to understand the woman who had written it, to see her as she had been. Young, trapped, heartbroken, shaped by choices and sacrifices she had carried in silence for decades. He wondered if she had ever truly been happy, or if she had spent her life quietly mourning a love she could never have.